I love the transparency of founders on socials, specifically when people are really open and vulnerable about the mistakes that they've made. Because I think often we see the shiny, and there definitely has been that history of romanticizing entrepreneurship and really glorifying what it's like. But in my experience, it has been mountain after mountain, definitely with wins in there that kind of keep you going.
You're so right about the sort of transparency, because I think you see people running these successful businesses online and you think it's a certain way, and then you do it yourself, you make heaps of mistakes, and then you realize that some of those traps are actually avoidable. And I think what people love about your style and listening to you, because you share a lot on social as well, it's just like the way that you just like cut the crap and give people the good stuff. You have a very no bullshit style. So I think it's going to be really helpful for people today to learn from you. You're also very young for a founder, and you're a female in a pretty male dominated space. Like you have a tech startup, still male dominated space. And I just like look at what you've done, and like for me, I'm in complete awe. I'm, close to 10 years older than you. And I just like cannot believe what you've done at such a young age. And I know you probably don't feel young, but I just think there's so much that people can learn from you. And I just think this way you've taken 9 years of experience and you've just condensed it down into what's going to be a 20-minute episode for people. So I think it's going to be really good.
Thank you for all of that, and thanks for saying I'm young. But I also I also think what I've come to realize is that when I first started out being a founder, or maybe my approach as an individual had always been that mistakes are bad, like must do good work, must succeed, must win, can't lose. And I think what I've realized is I'm actually quite proud of every mistake that I've made. And like writing these like 10 mantras, they're all derived from real life mistakes that I've made at Sunroom over the past 4 years, but probably like compounded with my experience whilst I was at Bumble as well. And I think one of the biggest lessons you have to learn as a business owner, but it can serve anyone throughout their career, is just like redefining what failure actually looks like. Because with every mistake, it's kind of not a dead end. It's not the end of the road. It's actually an opportunity to strike again, but with a little bit more accuracy and taking a little bit more of an informed shot.
Yeah.
So I'm actually quite proud of all like 10 of these mistakes, because they've made me and my business much stronger. And they've also made
Yeah.
my story much stronger.
I love this. And I think it's the thing I hate about people talking about failure, and failure is so good. No one actually shares the details of the mistakes. And so it's really hard to believe. You go, yeah, I get failure is good, but I don't actually believe it until I see examples. So the kind of what you're sharing today is like actual details, actual examples of proper mistakes and things that you've failed at, and then how I assume how you've recovered and kept going. So, yeah, I also think that one other thing, I had a peek at some of your notes, and like regardless of whether you're in a business or not, or have ambitions of owning a business, like most of your points are so relevant to anyone, like people working in an office job, like people who run a startup, small business, whatever. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Number one, Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn, said, if you're not a little embarrassed by your product, you've launched too late. And this was my co founder and my first mistake. We felt like we had to launch a squeaky clean product that had all the bells and whistles, something that we felt really proud to put out into the world. And it ended up taking us a year to build our app, which is too slow in the world of tech. And it's because we just couldn't let our standards down and our perfectionist tendencies down. And if we just got it out the door, we would have saved a lot of time and money. And we also would have been able to get real feedback back and get a bit of a sense on like, if we're on the money in a faster kind of feedback loop
Yeah.
than going out with a product that at the end of the day was actually over engineered and ended up having features that people just didn't need.
Interesting. Yeah, it's there's this line from a movie, I think it's We Bought a Zoo. I haven't actually watched the whole film. I just really like the quote, which is, "All you need is 20 seconds of insane courage." And then it talks about this idea of embarrassing bravery. And I like think about that all the time as I'm trying to do things, embarrassing bravery. But I think you're right. It's more about you've done your surveying, you've asked people if they think it's going to be good. You've kind of built this thing that you think is going to be good. But until you actually put it in front of people and people actually get out their credit card and are willing to pay for stuff, you don't really know. And then as soon as you do launch something, you just like catapult your kind of learning feedback loop, and then you can make something that is actually really good. So yeah, I think that's a really big one. Just that thing that you said, Michelle, around like waiting too late and this idea we have of trying to make something that's perfect. I was just talking to a friend about this on the weekend, and it's that feeling of you'll have sort of a spark of an idea, and then you see, and then you'll kind of be trying to make it perfect, and you kind of never do anything with it, and then you see someone else comes out with something the same kind of idea, and it's way less good than how you would have done it, and like they did it and they've been successful, and you see this all the time. I was just talking to a friend about it. So yeah, just trying to get out the smallest, simplest version of your thing just to get that feedback loop. Yeah, I think that's really.
Yeah, definitely, like, actually building an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. Ours was not an MVP. So I think for anyone starting something, just remembering that.
Yeah, and if you don't know what MVP is, I'm sure a lot of people listening do, but just go to ChatGPT and get them to teach you about it, and then definitely kind of follow that. Yeah.
Number 2 definitely ties into the first one, and it's don't assume because a competitor has a feature that it actually works or people use it. So when we were founding Sunroom and coming up with our feature set, we spent a lot of time doing product teardowns of our competitors, and we started working on features that we assumed people would want or people would use because our competitors had them. And there was one feature in particular that spent a lot of time building, and it was so poorly adopted, and that was a huge learning curve for us.
Interesting. Yeah. So, how do you then? Is there ever the flip where because you sort of see people in tech all the time, or like tech companies copying each other's features, and there is some assumption that it does, like those features do work. Is there a distinction that you have to make between some things that would actually be used and you should be paying attention to, and then the things that you should be ignoring?
I think where we went wrong in our decision making process is that we should have interviewed like a wider subset of the creators on Sunroom.
Yeah.
I think generally, like going, especially in the early days, like going where the money flows is kind of a better way to approach what you build, not necessarily just also building things because people say they want them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will interview your consumers and everyone will tell you that they'll use something, but when push comes to shove, they actually won't. And sometimes it can be really hard to get honest answers, especially if you've built like relationships with
Yeah.
your users. Sometimes they don't want to offend you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I
Yeah.
don't know if that actually answers your question.
Yeah. No, it does for sure. And then I think in a work context, I think there's almost the same principle. So we would often talk at Google about landings, not launches, and you'd see other teams like from other countries, and they'd have this amazing launch, and they'd send this amazing launch email, and you just like you're just kind of sitting there with so much FOMO, thinking like, oh my god, we should be doing this, and then everyone would have so it's a very loud launch, and then there would be this very quiet, actually that didn't really work that well. You'd never really hear about
Mm.
if it was actually kind of average, you'd never really hear about it. So yeah, we would always kind of say to ourselves, landings not launches, and don't just pay attention to this big kind of glossy, loud launch email.
Okay, the third one, still on the competitor train of thought, is it's always nice to know who you're up against and be aware of their strengths and weaknesses, but stay focused on your differences. And this one kind of hurt me to learn because it was something that I already knew. I already knew like keep your head in your boat, like don't look around, it slows you down. But I think sometimes when you're doing something for the first time, sometimes your trust in yourself and your instincts can become a little bit rattled, and so you do start to look around a little bit, and I think that's when you can lose focus. And we definitely went through a period of that at Sunroom where we just started paying too much attention to how our competitors were growing. And we
Mm,
started trying to copy some of their acquisition strategies. And it just ended up being a complete waste of time. And we would have been better off focusing on what was working for us and just continuing to double down on that or think about new innovative ways to keep kind of targeting that same niche of creator for us.
how did you get out of that phase then, if you were kind of just looking at what your competitors were doing and that was kind of shaping the decisions you were making? How did you stop doing that? And then what did you start doing differently instead?
Well, we ended up losing quite a bit of money. So that was that was a pretty big wake-up call when
Yeah,
there was kind of something that we knew was working really well for our competitors, but we never wanted to do it. But we reached this point of desperation at one time. And so we felt like, all right, this is our only option. Let's give this a crack. And it was hands down the worst thing I think we did in the history of Sunroom and lost us considerable amounts of time and money. And so that was just a slap across the face, like wake up call in terms of, you know what, let's go back to the drawing board and we actually ended up going back to what our go to market strategy had been and
yeah,
how we initially built a lot of hype and had a lot of success. And I think sometimes you might set really aggressive growth targets. So you think that what you were doing a year or two ago wasn't that successful. But then as you've learned and as you've tried a lot of other things, you have a bit more of an understanding of the market, the industry, maybe what a reasonable pace is. And you're able, with the benefit of hindsight, to look back and realize, oh, actually, that was quite successful. We just didn't really
interesting.
have like the wisdom to understand that at the time. And
Yeah.
now we can go back and try it again with like all of these other learnings and mistakes and just stay focused on like what made people like us initially.
I think that's really interesting that you sort of did something, maybe it wasn't as successful, and then at a different time it was. How much time would you spend in your day actually talking to your customers and your users?
Like if I'm working for 8 hours, 7 hours out of the
Yeah.
eight.
But
Yeah.
that's I like from what I've heard, I've never run a startup, but it's sometimes founders get into this trap where they don't want to talk to their customers or they feel like it's so time consuming. But like especially in the early phases, most of your time should just be spent hanging out with them and learning from them. Yeah.
100%. It's that saying like do things that don't scale. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really important at the start because it builds a lot of brand loyalty. And that's something that has always paid off for us and worked really well. That's always meant that our retention is good and we've kind of got these people that are willing to advocate for us.
Yeah. I
Um,
always love that whenever I'm signing up for new products and it's like a very techy, you just think it's kind of like this faceless software. And then the email you'll get, like once you, sign up for it, sometimes I'll get emails like 3 days later from the founder and they're like, hey, just checking in how you're finding the product. And you're like, whoa, I thought this was this massive software company. And now it just feels very human and very personal. I really like
yeah.
that.
That's such an easy way to stand out if you have a tech company because we're also used to existing on these giant platforms where there's no way we're ever going to directly hear from anyone from like, Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
TikTok. You lose your account and like it's really impossible to get in touch with someone.
Yeah.
So I think if you're building a tech product, like people really appreciate that personal touch and yeah, being able to speak to a real human on the end of a line.
Yeah.
Number 4 is when you're building features, people don't care about the feature, they care about the benefit. So if you're going to speak about it to your consumers, you need to focus on that. I think when you work at a tech company, there are so many smart people that are able to solve these really tough problems through, like engineering, critical thinking, coming up with like innovative ways to get people to connect on a product, whatever it is. And then there can be a tendency to get really excited about certain features that actually the consumer doesn't really care about.
Yeah.
And I think that's that friction, that tension point that can often exist between engineering teams and marketing teams,
Yeah.
which is something that I also experienced when I worked at Bumble. You get given a feature, you have to market it, and you're thinking, no one is going to care about this. But I think it's really in how you communicate it. So, not talking about what the feature is or kind of how it exists, but what the benefit is for the user.
So true. We lived by this at Google. So our sort of like the way we did marketing at Google is know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. And the magic is nothing to do with the product or the feature. It's about the transformation that it creates in someone, or like the joy that it sparks, or the time it saves them, whatever. But it's
Mm,
nothing to do with the product or the feature. I mean, obviously it's to do with the product or the feature, but it's like not about the product or the feature. So
yeah.
yeah, I think about that all the time. There's that really famous quote, which whenever someone says it to me, I never understand. I have to like process it slowly. My brain is slow, but it's people don't want the drill; they want the hole. And so the other thing is they want the change, right? They want the thing it's making. They don't actually want the benefit of the product. So they want the change. I actually have a question for you on this, Michelle. Again, I talk to a lot of friends. It's just like everyone wants to start a business, small business, it feels like in my world. But I was talking to a friend and they were saying, we're sort of Silicon Valley drives this thing into us where it's like you have to be solving a problem. And a lot of us tend to think like we have to come up with this brand new idea solving this problem for people, and that's the only business ideas that can work. And then you see people who have a candle company and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year selling candles. So like what problem is that solving? So I guess my question to you is,
Mm.
do you think we all need to be seeking this like problem we're solving in people's lives and this, innovative, not even innovative, just this like unique idea that no one else is doing? Or like, can it just be like you're creating some joy in someone's world?
The idea of launching a direct to consumer product that just goes viral on TikTok Shop and makes me like $1 million in a month is very appealing.
I know. I
Financially, right? Very appealing. But I know that I like working on something that has a bit more of a mission to it. Like, I've
Yeah.
kind of chosen these 3 businesses over the past 10 years of my life that have been all about making the lives of the women that use the products better, and also about being challenging the status quo in one way or another. Like with Bumble, it was all about getting women to make the first move, and if they could make the first move on an app, maybe they could ask for the promotion, maybe they could ask for the pay rise, and that's what really got me out of bed every day. And with Sunroom, it's that we're offering financial opportunities, freedom, independence to a large category of creators that are often overlooked, but they've worked
Yeah.
really hard to build the communities that they've got. And you could probably come up with a story like that about a candle, maybe if like that candle has some kind of meaning to you
Yeah.
in your life. Or maybe you're the kind of person where you don't actually need that kind of depth to work hard and kind of commit a period of your life to something. But for me personally, I need a bigger why
Yeah.
to actually work hard and hustle.
Whenever I listen to you talk about it, you're very clear on what your value is. And then this thread that it has created through the decisions that you've made in your career. And maybe that's done retrospectively, whatever. But I really admire it. And the thing I always love that thing around challenging the status quo. When you first explained Sunroom to me as it's like a cross between Instagram and OnlyFans. I don't know if that's how you still talk about it, but I thought it was so crazy and cool that you would kind of go into that space and you really were challenging the status quo, which is like if you're building a kind of reputable startup, like people would think to stay so far away from something like OnlyFans. And I loved that you were going
Mm.
into that territory. I just like, yeah, I thought it was really cool. So you definitely live that.
Thanks. Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely created its own challenges, like having a platform that allows a portion of the content to be like sensual or sex positive, still in like a gated way
Yeah.
that allows us to exist on the App Store, still has meant that like we couldn't raise money from some of the bigger institutional funds. And it's definitely made it harder to grow our business. Like we're unable to run ads on Meta platforms and often on TikTok because they actually won't allow us to speak about the platform and to speak about how it makes people money. But I
Mm.
think when you're committed to the mission, it kind of doesn't matter. Like you have to come up with ways to work around that, and you end up finding investors that also believe in that mission. So it
Yeah,
actually like weeds out. I don't think I'd want to work with anyone who didn't back the mission anyway. So it weeds them out.
so good.
Number 5. This is a great one, and this came from one of Sunroom's investors actually, who fun fact, he is the creator of Little Michaela, which was that first like avatar AI
Yeah,
influencer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's his company, and he said something to Lucy, my co-founder, and I, which just really stuck one day. He said, "If you want advice, ask for money, and if you want money, ask for advice." And when you're raising capital, it's just the best way to go about it. Like, hit people up and bring them in on your journey, talk to them about what you're building, talk to them about the problem, talk about the product, talk about the wins, talk about your challenges. And if they end up loving your product and believing in you, they'll just offer to invest, or they'll offer to intro you to someone else who might be that first check. And it's just a really smart way to go about raising money as opposed to just outright asking for it.
Why do you think that works?
I think it probably helps the individual in how they tell the story, to be honest. Like, it removes that pressure of, I'm about to kind of stand up and pitch to someone with the goal of like getting cash at the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think you end up sharing the story in a different way. And people also like talking about themselves and kind of having their egos stroked a little bit.
Yeah.
So reaching out to investors or angels or other founders in your space and sharing your struggles and then asking for their advice in return. It's just a very good way to build relationships. And what we ended up doing with this approach at Sunroom is like anyone we spoke to, we added them to a list, which was friends of Sunroom. And then once a quarter, we send everyone on that list an update with
Yeah.
what we'd kind of achieved at Sunroom for the quarter, screenshots of the product, marketing wins, some high level growth numbers, not what we would share our investors, but just high level, kind of keeping them involved. And it's just, yeah, it's a really good way to build allies. You often get intros off the back of those kinds of updates. And then if and when you actually really do need something,
Yeah.
you've done really solid groundwork to then be able to ask a little bit more directly if you end up needing to.
I love that. Do you have any advice for someone who, like we're in Australia, right? And a lot of the money is in not Australia, in the US, I guess. And so for someone sitting here being like, I kind of want to start talking to people and networking and maybe following this kind of thing around asking for advice and hopefully getting money, how did you get started getting connected to people? And do you have any advice for other people?
Yeah, so it did definitely help that my co-founder and I had backgrounds in tech. So
Yeah.
I first went out to my own network, which was people I'd worked with when I was at Bumble, and was able to get the founder and CEO of Bumble to invest in Sunroom. And that then made it much easier to kind of start reaching out to people that we didn't have relationships with because you've already got these checks committed and it shows this level of belief in you as a founder, I suppose.
I've also heard a lot of people working in like corporate jobs who leave and want to start their own company. And they do go and hit up all the execs because they know that a lot of the execs probably have a spare 10K and they already
Yeah.
know that this person is good. And so they're kind of like, I believe in you. I think I know that what you're building has potential. And they like sometimes they'll get their first little small checks through that. I think it's smart.
Yeah, exactly. And then they will introduce you to their networks and it
Yeah.
kind of just goes from there. And once someone that's worked with you is out there then speaking to their network saying, hey, this person's building X and I've invested, it just creates this snowball effect where you kind of trust your network and then you might end up investing as well. But I also think it is a really good strategy to get on socials and talk about what you're doing. There's that saying, build in public. And that ended up achieving a lot for Lucy and I. And I was really surprised with just who was watching. And so I wouldn't be afraid. And I mean, you don't need to have followers to pull that off. Like TikTok is
I was just gonna say, can you give us an example? Because I heard this, I love it, I wanna do it, and I found it's actually harder to do than I thought, just because it feels so unnatural to be like, "What do you think my business model should be?" Whatever. I'm finding it actually really hard even though I wanna do it. So can you give some examples of what building in public actually looks like?
it's probably going to feel uncomfortable and it's probably going to feel a bit icky, but it's not self promotion, it's idea promotion. Like that's how I like to think about
Yeah.
it. And it kind of breaks down that like where you feel a bit gross because you're talking about your own work or you're talking about yourself. You're actually not. You're talking about your ideas. It's like, hey, I've been working on this problem. Does anyone else have this problem? I'm working on solutions for this that I'd really like to share with others and just start talking about it in whatever way comes naturally to you as well. Like it doesn't really have to be on TikTok, but I do think TikTok is good if you don't have an existing audience because anything can go viral, anything can get eyeballs.
Just to build on that, I fully agree with the, like, TikTok. The cool thing about TikTok is people don't really wanna get to know you, they just care about the thing you're talking about versus Instagram, where people actually want to know you and sort of have to know you a little bit before they'll engage, with your content. So, yeah, like, TikTok's amazing for just, like, sharing ideas. Yeah, love that.
Yeah, even just going into the explore page on TikTok to gain inspiration and search things like founder stories, founder day in the life. And there are so many people that are showing you from inception through to launch, or like they're still at that idea generating step. And it can be good to get inspo from others and then take your own, spin on that. But yeah, I found that investors started reaching out to me once I started just speaking about what we were working on socials.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, don't be afraid to do that. I think sometimes there's a little bit of fear around, will someone steal my idea? And I don't think you need to give away your like secret sauce, or if you're working on a really innovative solution to something, you don't need to give that away in this information, but there's definitely no risk talking about the problem, what you're working on, how you're thinking about doing it. I am of the view if someone could take it and copy it, then it was probably not going to be that great or defensible anyway. Okay, number 6, and I definitely learned this one the hard way. Culture is what you punish and what you celebrate. So one rotten apple will spoil the bunch. And I really feel like that truth is exaggerated when you're in a small team and you really can't settle for bad attitudes. So you've probably heard the saying, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
But when you have a startup, I think unfortunately your brain is more geared to hire fast as possible. Like you're just trying to grow, you're trying to scale. It's that move fast and break things mentality. And it can really end up hurting you. I also think there's that level of excitement, like, yay, I'm finding people that actually also believe in this thing I'm doing, and I just want to get them in the room. This is actually something Whitney said, the CEO and founder of Bumble. I remember her saying at a company retreat once, one rotten apple will spoil the bunch. And it is very true. And I think sometimes when you're at the start, you feel like maybe you don't have that many options hiring. And so you do have to settle maybe for less than what you'd want
Yeah.
because you're still validating your idea and it actually can be hard to hire people. But in my experience, it never ends up working well hanging on to poor performers or people with bad attitudes.
Yeah, that attitude thing. I speak to so many leaders, owners of companies, things like that, and I am so surprised. I'll always say to them, "What are the qualities you're looking for in young people that you hire?" And I'm so surprised by how many people say number one, attitude. Because if you like, so many other things can be learned, but if you have a bad attitude, it just undermines everything. Back to your point, Michelle,
Mm.
around, I really liked that thing you said around punish. What was it? Punish.
Culture is what you punish and what you celebrate.
Yeah. So how can you do you have any examples of like what that looks like or how you actually do that as a leader, a business owner?
I think with the culture is what you punish, it's like at the start, Lucy and I were quite scared to be a bit ruthless. Like, you kind of hear that in business you need to like flex that muscle a little bit. You're going to have difficult conversations and hard conversations, and um we had so much fucked up stuff happen to us. Like,
Like what?
employees stealing from us. It's like
No.
stealing our money.
No,
Yeah.
how are they even doing that?
Yeah, yeah, like on company cards, or we had test versions of the product where you actually could make money through the app, and we realized that some members of our team were sending each other, like, thousands of our coins, on Sunroom to kind of get each other's earnings up when they were linked to Sunroom accounts, and
Is
yeah,
that just
so
an immediate fire?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
But yeah, I kept a journal at the start of, like, the major thing that would occur every week, and it was just blow
Wild.
after blow, like engineers taking your IP and trying to sell it on the side, like, just wild stories.
Oh
Uh
god, this is so I was thinking like I'm sitting there thinking like people complaining too much, but like that's yeah, that's serious.
It honestly was laughable sometimes, like, yeah, you kinda just gotta roll with the punches.
Yeah.
But, I also think what you celebrate. So, even this kind of happened at Bumble, actually. There was this culture of loads of emojis, lots of exclamation marks, getting really excited almost by the bare minimum,
Yeah.
getting really excited by someone just kind of meeting expectations. And it kinda had to be overhauled, because it meant that once someone actually wasn't performing, they were really shocked, because they'd been met with so much joy and excitement at all these other points along the way. So I think, like, in terms of what you celebrate as well, just being aware of things as simple as that, like how
Yeah.
exclamation marks and emojis can actually lead someone to feel like they're doing an incredible job, when maybe they're just kind of average. And then
Yeah.
if you have to start performance managing that person, there's a bit of a disconnect. Um, that's like
I
an interesting example, I think, because I
That
wouldn't
is an
even I
amazing example because I think as well, I hear a lot, especially about, a lot of people love complaining about Gen Z and about how entitled they are. And sometimes I see that exact problem where companies sort of started celebrating the wrong behaviors or they're just like over celebrating things. And then people get used to that and it's sort of not
yeah.
their fault. And then the leaders want something to change because the company's growing and then they expect people to just understand. I remember I'm just now thinking of this one example because I think it's so hard to do as well as a leader to correct culture in front of everyone, right? And I just remember this one example. I will never forget it. So it was our CEO of Google, Sundar. It was at an internal company. We have something called like TGIF, which is like everyone in the company can join. And this was a long time ago, so I'm not sharing anything confidential. But there was probably like 50,000 people on the call, maybe more. Like anyone in the company could join who was awake at that time, kind of thing. And I remember there was a
Wow.
team.
Imagine hosting that.
I know. Totally, right? And then imagine doing this. So anyone can get up and ask a question. And, it's like at a company that's 180,000 people, it's hard to, like the culture is changing and, there's like the company's going through different phases. And someone stood up and said, so a team had just shared some progress they'd made with sustainability in terms of like the product and packaging, and someone stood up and they asked a question where the premise of the question was very much like, is this really progress or is it greenwashing? And what Sundar did was so amazing because I was like, is he going to say anything? And he so elegantly addressed the premise of the question. And he said, you cannot understand the complexity that goes into even the smallest of changes with something like this. And we at this, he did, these aren't his words, but he then said, um, sort of attacking the integrity and the hard work of another team is not what we do here. And it was
Mm,
so powerful because he just did it in the moment and he wasn't rude. He just showed up and I was like, I will never forget that. And I thought it was so powerful
mm.
as like a way to course correct what was bad attitude and like a problem that was starting to happen in the company with the culture. He was able just to course correct it publicly in this moment. I thought it was really brave.
Wow, that's incredible. Also, just to publicly, like, kind of have your employees' backs. I think, like, any leader
Yeah.
displaying that they've got your back is kind of what I've always respected in someone.
The trait that like the never throwing you under the bus. I remember I had this manager and whenever like I would do something wrong, he would always slip into using we language, which would like just made me felt like it's actually everyone's problem together. It's not just on you. And he would like in front of everyone, he would, he would start using we language and not just
Mm.
like saying you did this. And yeah, I think it's really powerful.
Number 7, so this also kind of comes back to performance. Steve Jobs said, "A's hire A's and B's hire C's." So A's will help you maintain a high performing culture, and you need to refine your recruitment process to find the A's. Um, and this is kind of what we started to learn or witness whilst we were working on Sunroom. We ended up hiring this absolute gun of an engineer who was 19 at the time, and he's still to this day our head of engineering, and he has 2 patents. I think he's 22 now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and he is just so smart, and um, as we began to grow the engineering team around him, we realized that he just helped maintain this very high performing culture, and that these genius types won't really settle for with working for people who are underperforming or not really willing to put the work in to level up. That doesn't mean there's not opportunity to expand upon your skill set and to learn and to be coached by great people. There's definitely that, but there also needs to be that element of wanting to do better.
Yeah.
um so yeah, when Lucy and I were trying to work out like what was this change we were witnessing at Sunroom, I remember stumbling across this Steve Jobs quote and just thought that's, yeah, an interesting observation.
How do you like just any advice or tips of how you find the A's and or like how to make sure you're not hiring the B's, especially if you're under pressure?
I actually don't know if I even have the answer because we
Yeah.
have made that many hiring mistakes, like time and time again. And we've changed our questions a million times over. And we definitely, to your point about what you were talking about with what leaders are looking for,
Yeah.
we we definitely lean more towards you don't really need to have the experience, but do you have the right attitude? Are you displaying a level of like hunger, commitment, competitiveness?
Yeah.
Like how, yeah, kind of like what do you work hard for? Those sorts of things, trying to identify that. But yeah, I like wish I had the answer, but I won't pretend I do because I've made the mistake so many times.
Yeah. Is there anything because sometimes there's probably like a bit of instinct, and that's actually based on probably like thousands of signals that you're picking up from someone. Is there anything around like the amount of time you spend with someone before you actually hire them or like having some kind of probation period that has helped? Is it like I actually spent, I went out and, went for a hike with this person and then after that time I knew they were good. That's not the thing. But like, yeah, is there any advice you have around that?
Yeah, we actually did do a trial period with someone once, and it was someone that we were going to be moving over to the States. So that allowed us to set something up where we could actually trial working with the person over a 2-month period.
Yeah.
And that was a really good strategy. Definitely like getting out of an office situation and like going for a drink with them or going to dinner with them.
Yeah.
Um, or starting to like jam on the side, like casually with someone if you can, depending on like what sort of a relationship you have. Like, can you just start, I don't know, texting about like TikToks that you're seeing, like whatever is relevant,
Yeah.
um, to get a little bit more insight into their brain.
I got this advice as well. If you are even thinking about maybe if you want to start a business with someone, don't sit down and be like, should we start a business together? Just start talking about ideas, constantly sharing voice notes, whatever, sharing stuff that you're into. And then just start like doing the thing. And then, at some point, yeah, you sit down, you have a conversation around and a contract around the business, but like just start. Yeah.
Okay, last one. This is a good one to end on. When hiring, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. And maybe that's kind of the answer to your other question.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
maybe it's not
Yeah,
about like the questions that you ask the person, because someone can also talk the talk but not walk the walk. And I
yeah.
think that's the hard thing to uncover through an interview process, and why so many hiring mistakes can be made. So Lucy and I just ended up defaulting to, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. And sometimes that means like you do let some candidates go that seem really strong. But I think, yeah, you got to trust your gut on that one.
Every hiring mistake I've ever made, I think back and I convinced myself into it because on paper or the brand or the just like skill that you think they have that you need at that time, and it's never worked out. So yeah, I think it goes back to that your gut is actually your second brain, and there's tons of signals that you're picking up when you spend time with someone that you don't actually, consciously know what they are, but yeah,
Mm,
it's so hard though because it's also like, how do you hold off? Like, do you keep holding off to find the fuck yes? Um, and I guess, yeah, there's probably no one answer, but I definitely know
yeah.
that what you just said is very true.
Was there anything unique about Google's hiring process that you think like helped Google's recruitment process?
I mean, so many things. It's very well resourced, and there's a lot of very smart people who work on hiring, and
Mm,
it also changed a lot. It evolved a lot over my time there, but the main thing is that they really incentivized referrals. So I can't remember what the number was now, but it was a pretty significant amount of money that you got if you referred someone and they got the job at Google. You personally got a pretty decent chunk of money, and yeah, like they just knew the stats and the data. Referrals bring in the best talent. But I
yeah.
also think there's a side of it where then you don't just want to be hiring this company filled with people who are exactly the same. And I think that was the problem at the start. There was lots of, everyone had the Ivy League background and the Stanford MBA and all that kind of stuff. And then they really diversified and kind of changed the policy. I think it's gotten better, but there was the like 13-round interviews kind of thing. I don't think it's like
Oh
that
my
anymore. But
God.
definitely there's like a lot of very smart people who put an incredible amount of thinking into hiring the right people. It's probably like one
Yeah.
of the areas that they spend the most amount of time on. Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
That was a lot. The whole thing, that was a lot, Michelle, and amazing. I just learned so much. Every single one of these points is going to be in the newsletter, and you can get that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.